USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Learn more and get a quote at usaa.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
Your backyard barbecue has some new RSVPs. Just tap Target. With the grill raring to go, your personal shopper is tackling your same-day delivery order at Target.
Babe, so Bob and Lynn are bringing the kids after all.
Pro tip, you can change your same-day order with a quick text to your shopper.
I'll have her add popsicles. Ooh, and some sidewalk chalk.
Your shopper texts a thumbs up. You text 5 exclamation points and life is good. Text with a personal shopper and get it all delivered ASAP. Just tap Target.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Greetings, everybody. With the deadline inching ever closer, Sam and I are back this week for a rare second helping, an almost unique, rare, extra pre-recorded pod like the old days. We have the brilliant pod with Ross, FPL Wrapped Out on Psychology and FPL Now, so please do go into that one too. Get to this week. But for this one, we felt, you know what, since the first pod back up until now, we've not really spent any airtime discussing about our drafts. So we thought we should just get this kind of bonus pod in for you, saying where we are, what we're thinking, just over a week to go to the old deadline from the time publication of this pod. Anyway, so Sam, hello, mate. Very interested to see your draft for reasons we'll discuss in a minute. How are you? I've heard you're at a festival this weekend. Too old for that, aren't you, these days?
Yeah, honestly, way too old. And I do apologise if my voice is a little bit on the croaky side today, but we thought it was important to get this out as quickly as possible. We haven't talked about our drafts in a little while, so no amount of festivals is going to stop me from getting back in time to record one of these with you, Tom. Yeah, it made me feel a little bit old as well, so I'm glad to be home in my own bed and thinking about FPL once more. Although I didn't go completely off the grid, I noticed certain analytic tools launching over the last few days and been keeping my eye on things, so hopefully I'm still plugged in enough. In the meantime, though, we are Who Got the Assist. This is a pre-recorded pod. We're going to be running through each other's drafts for the first time in quite a while. I don't think I've seen your draft in, well, definitely over a week, but probably a little bit longer than that as well. And I think it's the same in reverse. So we've intentionally been keeping it a bit of a secret from each other in the hope that when we get to this pod, there will be some key differences. We haven't had any groupthink, and any similarities are coincidental and have been created through independent thought and research rather than just being created through this pod and agreeing with each other. But no doubt there will be similarities.
So everyone's kind of thinking, yeah, whatever, lads. You clearly just looked at it, group funk it.
Yeah.
But no, definitely 100%. We said even last week that we for this pod, we weren't going to look at each other's drafts because I think it's just better to have that, even though on some level it'll be a little bit of taking in, but hopefully while the other person's talking through their draft, we'll be able to do that.
For sure. So yeah, of course, we're going to look through the drafts. Hopefully they're not 15 out of 15 the same. That would be a bit of an anticlimax if they were. And we'll be talking through our choices and maybe debate a few of the interesting picks. Plus maybe see whether there are specific chip strategies on the cards for either of us and what our thinking is around those things. So like I said, we're pre-recording this on Tuesday, the 5th of August. It's going to go live on the 7th. So there's a 2-day turnaround. So of course, if there's any big news that goes down in the next 24, 48 hours that we don't have on this podcast, Tom is probably going to cut in at some point, probably around now, to say, this is what happened. We weren't aware, but obviously these are the things that will change if something game-changing does break in the next 48 hours or so. In the meantime, though, we've got, we've at time of recording 10 days until release, but 8 days until release by the time this goes live and you're listening to it. So, shall we talk through our drafts, Tom? I think you might be first up.
So this is really timely, isn't it? I listened back to the Psych Pod to do a bit of production earlier on, and happened to get to the bit on confirmation bias, where we were speaking about that, and the need to find ways and means to guard against confirmation bias and try to embrace challenge, seek out counter narratives, seek out voices which kind of go against where you've gone in your own head. And as I've not really had your voice in my sort of advisory council, as it were, it'd be really interesting, and hopefully this will help sort of refine some choices, or maybe we'll just groupthink ourselves into a mini herd and get, as you said, 15 out of 15. But hey, right, here we go then. I'll go up first then. I think what I'll do is, for the purposes of the audio, and obviously you see it on YouTube straight away, I'll read out the team as it is and maybe give a bit of gloss, Sam, about kind of how I've got to where I am right now. I'm not going to give reasoning for each player. I'm sure we'll get into that at some point soon. But I think that's kind of, I think maybe that's where we'll run it, and then we'll kind of see where we go to, and when we get to yours, I'm sure we will get there pretty organically, won't we?
Yeah. Cool. Right. Over to yours then, I suppose. So number one, Tom's draft as it currently stands. I'm going to sit back, relax, and let you walk through it very quickly whilst you read it out for the listeners, and try and take it in myself as well.
Right. So goalkeepers are Matt Sells, and then a 4.0 goalkeeper. At the moment, it's Darlow. That could be Dubravka. At the back, in descending order of price, Virgil, Pedro Porro, Colwill, Neco Williams, Wan-Bissaka. In midfield, Salah, Palmer, Ndai, Harry Wilson, Belabor, and up front, Watkins, Wood, and Strand Larsen. Now, I normally try to make decisions fairly early. Like, I don't want to be made when it comes to preseason, Sam. I'm sure you'll know about this about me. I don't be doing much more than rearranging the deck chest on Titanic in terms of a few sort of the edge pieces, the A's versus B's in the final week. In my experience, at least, just bad decisions on my part, and I don't want to be making huge decisions at that point. Like, I want to kind of guard against that decision fatigue we spoke about on the pod with Ross, and this is kind of what works for me, I guess. And the last minute decisions will be final sense checks. So FPL review is live now. Solio is live as we speak, actually, when we're recording, and that will be part of that mix as well when it comes to the final week. I've got all the information. I know that sort of differs from you, because I know that you like to make your decisions pretty late on in the process, whereas I like to kind of get the main ones kind of done. Two big decisions. One is no Haaland. I don't think that's a big one, actually, in the context of kind of the FPL community, but I think that is actually quite a big one if you speak to people outside of FPL. And two is bench boost one. I think I've decided on that now, but I'm calling this, and you'll know that I've talked to you about this one. I'm calling this a sustainable bench boost, in that the plan is I don't need a chip or a wild card to get out of it. I'm hoping it gets him to the target of 8 or 10 points, and gets rid of the chip. Then functions as like a clear FPL side with the best 11 and some flexibility going forward. And I suppose it's for me, bench boost one, what swung me was obviously the new changes and not kind of falling prey to Semmelweis perhaps, but also the net good of spending the chip early on and getting it done. Like, I think it's a bit of a millstone in a manager's neck. So I've always found that. And if I was to put it off the decision until later, wildcard 7, bench boost 8, I don't know if you're going to say that, Sam, as your part of your plan, but I looked at that and I didn't like it as much, because there's just so much that could happen at that point. Obviously, there's loads of negatives about bench boost 1 as well. I could fully accept that. But I think that I just prefer to get it sorted out now. I did look at bench boost 2, but I don't really like half a bench of Burnley and Sunderland assets. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of it. My entire team, as you probably would have heard, is mostly made up of really solid ex-Mins players as well. That's not kind of an FPL review thing. I have looked at it, but I haven't got Anderson, for example. I haven't got Thiago, so I'm not a complete review slave. The 5.5 million mid in Wilson and the backup goalkeeper are probably the two sort of big sort of minutes risks, but they both perform like a certain task. So the 5.5, obviously, I need that for the rest of the team to work. Wilson seems like okay as the magic bean, decent at show Penanti when he played last year, playing for a settled team. And Belabor, that could be any 5.0 really. Oh yeah, and the goalkeeper, the 4.0. I just want one of them really. If not, I can mess it around to get the 4.5. But yeah, that's kind of where I am, Sam. That kind of bench boost 1 with hopefully a lot of flexibility in the team Like, so I can play the 4 big defenders in Colwill, Porro, Virgil, and Williams I want to, and go to a 4-3-3 with Strand Larson on the pitch, play the 4-4-2 as you see here, or go to a 3-5-2. It's pretty flexible. I've got lots of depth in the squad as well as Palmer and Watkins, which is kind of what I wanted. So yeah, that's where I've landed at the moment.
Okay, interesting. So before I tear it to shreds or critique it, would you like me to look at mine, or should we start looking at yours in full now?
Let's look at yours, just so I can go. I've got some idea of that one as well. So I know my team.
Yeah, cool. Because
so
I think that's good for context, because we've got a few similarities that I think it's nice to kind of run over now, and then we can like pick apart all of the differences individually. Maybe we've got a graphic later on for that potentially. So my current draft, it's obviously still very much in flux. As you mentioned, I do like to keep my options open until later on. But there are quite a few players that have appeared in almost all of my drafts and have been in for a long time now. So again, I don't want to rule myself out of taking them out, but I'm more confident in certain ones. And actually, luckily, a lot of them are the ones that you also happen to have as well. So starting in goal, I've still got Sanchez as my Chelsea representative 5.0. I've got Dubravka on my bench in the hope that he signs for Burnley and becomes that number 1 immediately. Obviously, keeping my ear to the ground on that one. Virgil van Dijk is my 6 million defender of choice at the moment. I think he just ticks too many boxes to ignore for me at the moment. And I'll walk through my strategy in a minute regarding when I plan on wildcarding, bench boosting, and why I think Virgil makes sense for that reason. Neco Williams and Anderson are both absolutely fantastic for their DEFCONs, but Williams is, I believe, a standout good pick at 5 million. He runs Murillo and Milenkovic pretty close in terms of not only the DEFCON, but also the attacking output and the minutes. And so for 0.5 cheaper, I think that was a sacrifice worth making. And I've also got a combination of Anderson and Gahey as my 2 4.5s. Anderson and Gahey serve a very important purpose, that being game week, I think it's 4 or it could be 5, when Nottingham Forest go up against Arsenal, and they are both at home to promoted clubs that week. So they rotate with each other averagely, but I'm happy to play Anderson in most weeks, considering Fulham's fixtures aren't terrible and he's great on the DEFCON. So 4-pointers will be a fairly regular occurrence anyway. And then in the 1 week where I desperately need to play both of them, I can, because they've both got a great fixture. I have got a 4.0 defender, that's a Stev, who I'm still pretty keen on. I think he's got a higher floor than most 4.0s would have, because he should be very good on the DEFCONs, and I expect Burnley to have to do a lot of defending. So I'm not expecting clean sheets there often, but what I am expecting is a few 3 or 4 pointers to raise the floor. So on a bench boost, if he can get me a 4-pointer, I'm very, very happy. Then moving into midfield, Salah, Palmer, and Ndiaye, I believe, are in both of our drafts. So we can talk about them probably for a brief amount of time. And Ndiaye is probably the most interesting one to actually talk about a little bit more. Then I've kept Anderson, although Anderson would normally not be in my starting 11. He'd normally be my 5th midfielder on my bench, playing in a 3-4-3 hybrid with a 3-5-2. But in game week 1, he's at home to Brentford, which leaves my 7 million midfielder Semenyo on the bench. That I'll talk through my plan B and plan C with Semenyo and one of the strikers in a moment, but I've landed on this for security purposes. Semenyo, after Liverpool's out the way, has a great run of fixtures, great on the expected minutes, not bad on the data. And I didn't particularly want to double up on the Aston Villa attack, which brings me on to the forward line, which includes Watkins, Solanke, which I believe is different to your Chris Wood. And then I've also got Strand Larson as well, who I think is a standout good pick at his price point, considering the expected minutes, the penalties, the underlying data. And I think the fixtures are largely being massively overlooked for Wolves. I think they've got a great run after that Man City game is out of the way. And because my wildcard plan is hopefully to leave it fairly late, I'm crossing my fingers I can leave it till post game week 10, 11, 12, possibly even 13. Then Strand Larson's fixtures include the 3 promoted clubs in that time and quite a few nice home fixtures in there as well. So Obviously, I'm looking at sustainability here. I'm looking at expected minutes. And I think almost every single one of these players I would back to get 90 minutes or 80 plus minutes in almost every single match. There's a lot of penalty takers in here. And there's a kind of alternative here, which would involve, instead of a Semenyo and a Strand Larsen, it could be a Thiago or a Fulkrug. If I was more confident in either of them, let's say Wissa does go to Newcastle, then that Strand Larsen position might get downgraded to a 6 million, and Semenyo would become Eze if he's safe at Crystal Palace rather than going to Arsenal. So that's one combination. And then another one I don't mind is if Gyökeres looks very likely to start game week 1, I don't mind jumping on him from game week 1, starting with him instead of Watkins, and Semenyo becomes Rodgers instead. So kind of 3 versions to this. This is my preferred one right now for security. But in both of those other 2 versions, there's like 2 positions that might change. And the other important thing to note is I could look at bench boosting in game week 2 with this. I'm very happy with how it shapes up with a bench boost for game week 2, especially if Dubravka goes to Burnley and starts, because they play Sunderland at home. However, with that in mind, I'm really not that fussed if that doesn't come to fruition and I just leave a 4.0 keeper and a 4.0 defender on my bench and look at doing it around the wild card either side of. So if I've got a lot of free transfers before a wild card, I might just spend a couple of them and get to a bench boost the week before a wild card. Or if I don't, then I've got 5 free transfers coming in game week 16 anyway, so I can work my bench boost around that, maybe spend a couple of the free transfers the week before I get the bonus ones and upgrade my bench that way and just get it out of the way around about then. But I'm pretty unfussed, and the more I think about the bench boost, the less I want to let it dictate such a long-term strategy for me. So I'm not going to be spreading my money around too much.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And I think it definitely, as you said, fits in as a sort of game week 2 bench boost, but sort of not. Like if you left the option open. Whereas I think that because I'm gonna say that I've made the decision now to bench boost in 1, barring some huge kind of bit. I don't know what it would be, but some very large bit of information coming out. And I think that within the confines of that decision, I've got a slightly different sort of proposition. But no, it is interesting. We've got, was it 8 of the same players, isn't it? Or 9 if you include 8 including the 4.0 goalkeeper effectively.
Yeah, so we've got this graphic here which we both blanked from each other, so we can probably count it up here. But I think it is 8. I'll count in the background now. Yeah, okay.
So I think
so
that's
yeah, it's not bad. About just over 50% similarities. So there's plenty of differences to run through. Anywhere in particular you want to start, Tom?
I'm going to basically just start with this. All of the players that you've got in your team, I have considered at some point, or have been in my team at some point, or could still make it into my team. I don't know whether that just shows that we are still, despite all the changes to FPL, still fishing in a very narrow pond, or whether it's just that we both have the same sort of, we're both looking for similar things in players. And I'm not at all surprised that you've slightly leaned maybe a tiny bit more to X minutes, whereas I'm only basing that basically off Wilson and versus Anderson or something like that. And then me having a 5.0 midfielder and you having somebody kind of in the middle. And I'm being a little bit more risky as it is having the big gap between a 5.5, 6.5, and then all the way up to Palmer, whereas you have something kind of in the interim. But I don't know. I think it might show a few things. And I don't know how much this has changed as well since review came out. You said you weren't really around, which is quite a good thing. There was players like Neco Williams and things that we both kind of picked up a couple of weeks ago on the price pod. And it's quite a good thing to see the review kind of agreed with me, or I agreed with review. I'm not sure which way around it goes on a few of these picks. And Anderson, for example, fine as the kind of the 5th player. For me, I think that's a bit too. I want to be paying 5.0 for that rather than the 5.5 for a player I'm hopefully not going to be playing. But I mean, totally get it. Should we start? I mean, in goal then. if we take the 4.0s out of the equation, we're both going to probably have one. I'll just run the gauntlet. I think if I need to get a 4.5, I'll figure out a way. Probably Porro ends up going because he's like the least secure in my defense, so maybe he goes down. But Sells versus Sanchez for me is incredibly close, Sam. It's just because I want the defensive cover from Chelsea, which is Colwill. And I don't want to double up on Chelsea at the back plus get Palmer, because then if something else happens, so João Pedro or Neto comes to the fore, I didn't really want to be in that position. So I thought that I just take Colwill for me and then triple up with Nottingham Forest. So I've got Sells, Williams, and Wood at the moment, basically. So I think I don't know. I can prefer that triple up and locking into that rather than locking up with triple. Chelsea, but I think Sells and Sanchez are the standout 5.0s, aren't they? Really, that as far as I can see, anyway, as far as we can.
Yeah, they're the two that I would pick out right now. And obviously, Sells was, I think, in the first draft I showed on this pod when the game first launched. So I'm not ruling him out. I think with Nottingham Forest, for me, I'm possibly questioning that we're looking a little or obsessing a little bit too much over last season's data on them. Like, are we expecting them to be as good? And therefore, do I want to double up in the defense? I'm not ready to completely throw away my assumptions on them being a good defense straight away, but I'm more cautious than not, having seen how they fell off towards the end of last season. Cautious enough that I don't want to double up, I think. The fixtures are good, but equally, there is that game week, again, I forget, it's either game week 4 or game week 5 where they've got that really awful one against Arsenal. So again, doubling up that week, and you would have to play Sells that week. So, it's not the end of the day, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine with that though. So, for example, the reason that Sells is in is predominantly because of the classic correspondence with Mark Southerns, who made a really, really good point about the bonus point changes for goalkeepers and how BPS for saves from inside the box are especially good for goalkeepers. And Sells is kind of, if he keeps on his god mode from last year, is the master of that. Like, I'd obviously have rotation for Williams that week, but it's one of those where I'd be playing Sells thinking, well, if he gets to a decent level of saves, there he is probably looking at the bonus as well, because saves from inside the box probably are a thing which is okay. And plus, I think for Forest, even though, yes, okay, they did fall off at the back of last season, one thing I would say is that their back 4 or 5 hasn't changed. Whereas for a lot of teams, Sanchez, this applies for as well. For a lot of teams, that there has been a lot, especially if we're fishing in this sort of area and below, there has been a lot of change in the defence. And for Forest, it's still the same back 4 or 5 as we saw last year. We're fairly sure of that. Although Aina, I think, is actually not playing in the friendlies tonight as we record, so that could be a but that people could throw at me. But yeah, I mean, I think either is a very good option. I just think that Sells maybe shades it, just because I'm happy to play him in a tough game because of the saves. I'm happy to play him kind of in other games because I think that they still set up defensively and set up to win 1-0, basically. And that's what Wood's there for too.
All I'd say on the saves point is I don't disagree with that, but he won't be getting the bonus points if they lose 2-3-0. So I'm not overly fussed about that. Like, he'll get the bigger haul if they keep the clean sheet and he happens to have saved 4 or 5, because he might get an extra bonus point other than last season he wouldn't have. But I would still expect Murillo, Milenkovic, and probably a striker or something to do pretty well when they clean sheet anyway. So yes, he'll do better, but I'm not sure that minor tweak in the FPL BPS algorithm is actually going to make such a standout difference that I'd pick him over what I would believe is a slightly better pick, in my opinion. But that's again maybe just because I'm expecting Nottingham Forest to revert a little bit, so I'm not confident enough as to double up on them. That would be my only argument on that one.
I think it's also because in defence, like I don't really, I know you've got 2 4.5s. I don't mind Anderson, don't mind Gahey. Because I'm on the bench boost 1 idea, people might be saying, "Oh, you haven't really thought, have you thought about other options?" Or blah blah. Believe me, I have. I've really kind of gone to town on it, and I've landed, and I've put it for FPL review, all this sort of thing, and I've landed on this being the one that I favour, because a lot of the time the review projections, I don't know, I'll look at Solio obviously tomorrow, but the review projections put them within 2 or 3 points of each other, which, as we found out last year when Simon was on, and plus for our own intuition, we know that just pushes the emphasis back on you for what you think is best. And I don't know, I just feel like I'm happy with kind of the going a bit more sort of heavy on the defense this year than I normally would, because you've got the Anderson and Gahey/Richards. I don't think either of them really suit a bench boost one in many ways. Like Gahey, obviously, probably not. With the
It'd
Palace
have to be
game,
different
Anderson a little bit.
4.5s, yeah.
Yeah, and I just don't really like many of the 4.5s really for that role, apart from maybe Wan-Bissaka. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the cheap seats for that game week one. I know that Anderson's one of those players that we both picked up on the pricing pod too, I think. But AWB feels like a bit of a default. Like, it just makes my decision making easier a little bit. Like, if I need a 4.5 to play a role, he's got a decent game one fixture, then Wan-Bissaka, I think I just go in, don't really think about it very much. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I think also Wan-Bissaka could also be Juve on the other side, who looks very, very tasty in preseason and comes with some great underlying data. The only thing, yeah, I guess this is why I'm less keen than maybe a lot of people on Bench Boost 1. I just look at the fixtures and I look at the consequences of what those fixtures in Game Week 1 create my Bench Boost looking like, and what I'd have to do to make it something I'm happy with. And there's not really a team I come out with where I'm like, yeah, I want to hold on to that for a long time. Because the alternative to what you're doing here is maybe you pack it full of like a couple of 4.0 Leeds defenders or something like that.
Yeah,
Obviously, you've got Darlow, Goodmanson, Rodon, or you could go for a Ronaldo at Sunderland, perhaps. But obviously, I understand why you're not doing that, because they're not very playable after Game Week 1. And that, like, all of those factors, plus the fact that there aren't many 4.5s I love for Game Week 1 bench boost, other than maybe a Wan-Bissaka or a Juve, is part of the reason why I don't really love the bench boost in Game Week 1 anyway. And I think the thing that people forget about bench boosts that almost inherently is the fact that most bench boosts involve just 2 extra defenders in your team than you would normally have. So it needs to be a week where you're confident of more clean sheets, or confident that those teams that you're representing have a better chance of their defenders getting attacking returns.
Certainly.
And I'm just not. I want to love Bench Boost 1, and I'm still trying to work out a way to do it, because I think theoretically that's the play. I think that if you can get it out of the way Game Week 1 and make it work, you're in a much better position coming out of it for the rest of the season. You don't need to worry about it. I'm struggling to get myself into a position where I'm like that excited by it. And I think it's going to actually pay off, not just for that week, but also in the weeks following, unless I wildcard out of it relatively soon. So I guess that's where our drafts kind of differ.
Yeah.
Which is good. Like, we want different strategies. I think we've had fairly similar strategies last 2 years. So it's quite encouraging that we've both landed on, well, not landed, because obviously we're not done yet, but we're thinking about different ways of cutting this up and playing the game for the first half of the season. And I think that goes to show that this is a positive thing for FPL, and it's actually given us some different strategies to think through, and people are going to be playing the game differently. So that's good.
Yeah, I think that literally highlights the fact that we both spotted a similar problem, which I'm not surprised by, that, you know, the 4.5s ain't great for Game Week 1.
Yeah.
And what I've done is I've gone off and found a way to invest a little bit more in the defence, because all 4 of the defenders, apart from Wan-Bissaka, are all at home, which I'm hoping would up and plus the goalkeepers, if it's Darlow at least, we're all going to be at home, which I'm hoping will give that tiny bit of added extra. I know it's mostly irrelevant to those chances of those clean sheets coming in, or in Porro's case, some semblance of an attacking return. Porro is literally there, by the way, just because those early fixtures are actually pretty good, apart from Game Week 2 Man City, which he can be covered for by Strand Larson, who's currently on my bench. He can go in terms of the bench boost, so he'll come on. And probably the one Spurs asset you can trust to start. Decent at SGI. Sadly, Maddison's injury means that he probably has a slightly bigger share of set pieces as well. So he's one that I'm fine to hold. And I think that, you know, this year, because of the as we said a couple of times, haven't we? Like, don't overestimate DEFCON in your mind, and I'm definitely not doing that. But some players have that nice sort of mix. So Virgil, we've both mentioned, both agree on having that, being that Goldilocks of having the triumvirate of clean sheet potential, DEFCONs, and some modicum, let's not overdo it, but a modicum of goal threat. Neko Williams, the exact same. I think Porro sort of fits into that. His DEFCON's all right. It's not amazing. Like I think it's like 8-ish. So, you've got a decent-ish chance of him getting them every now and again.
Yeah, 1 in 5 games you might get something. Yeah,
that's fine. And Colwill is literally doing the same. Colwill, I see him as basically being a Sanchez proxy, Sam. He's very, very beige, but decent fixtures throughout the start. And I'm just kind of, I know you hate the term, but with defense, you can actually legitimately a lot of the time say I'm covering that defense, because it's not just one player, it's 5, and the main output being the clean sheet, or the main threat being the clean sheet. There's no real DEFCONs, there's no real attacking threat with Colwill, but he's 5.0. He's in a defense that is fairly solid and has a fairly good start to the season. That's the only reason why, and that's why I picked all those players basically. But there's one sort of big reason to move the midfield. There's one big sort of sacrifice I've made, which is that I've got to deal with a 5.0 midfielder of some sort. That's Belaber at the moment, but I know that Belaber hasn't featured in preseason yet, so that could end up being Xhaka. I think that Keenan Dewsbury Hall moved to Everton. You've got James Garner. Like, these are all players that are going to be a solid 1 week pick. That'll be it. And after that, they're just going to sit on the bench for me. And that feels okay to me, because I'm the sort of manager who likes to have decisions limited. Like, I don't like to have more money on my bench, and I don't want to be making like big decisions every week. I want things to be quite simple and clear cut. So that's why that's there. I believe was good on the DEFCONs, of course, as we know. So ideally he'd be the 5.0 I'd go with for that Fulham game and see what happens next. But yeah, I mean, I all things being equal, if I wasn't bench boosting one, I'd definitely be looking at your team and thinking, yeah, I mean, that we'd probably, if I wasn't bench boost one, Sam, to be honest, be arguing over apples and oranges right now for 2 players, and the rest of them be like, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And I mean, look, there will also be a lot of people listening to this pod saying, oh, well, what about player X, Y, Z? So we can go through them as well. And I think it's important to have routes to players if you need to. So it wouldn't be crazy to think that Gyökeres gets off to a hot start. He might, and we might desperately want him after a few game weeks. Well, luckily we've both got Watkins in. So, okay, Gyökeres might go up by a little bit, but if you absolutely desperately need to get to him, you can probably find a way, 2 transfers at absolute most, to get to him without too much of a sweat. I think the main difference, if we move into the midfield, I suppose, well, we've both got Salah, we've both got Palmer. So obviously we can always downgrade one of them, more likely Palmer, to go to Saka, Bruno, Verts as well, or to upgrade or move funds into the forward line with 2 free transfers if we need to. I suppose the question I would have between our two, and again, this is part of the sharing of funds, and it makes sense, but to be fair, mine's not perfect either with Semenyo, is how would you get to a Verts or a Bruno? Bruno, obviously a bit of a review darling, as we've seen, and I think that he's gotten a lot of stick, and review managers that like review have gotten a lot of stick over the last 24, 48 hours because of it. But when you think about it logically, he is a great pick. He ticks all of the boxes, all of them. So, okay, fixtures aren't great to begin with. How are either of us getting there if we need to? And Verts in a similar way as well, 8.5, 9 million. What would our plans be to get to someone like that outside of selling Palmer, who has a good run of fixtures, and we probably won't want to sell him?
No, it's pretty tricky, isn't it? I think we'd have to start. Again, I think a lot of it does kind of lead to the way you think about these things. I know that a lot of people, and we've spoken about this in the past with your sexy spreadsheet and things, like to plan things to the nth degree. I think to add to that point, Man City, ? Neither of us have any of them. I suppose we get there quite easily, but if Haaland started going gangbusters, that we'd have to make some serious decisions. I know people like to plan things to the nth degree. What I've kind of done is looked at the first 4 weeks and figured, okay, if I can make this team work for 3 weeks out of 4, and then have some plan for the second week, whether it's just offering myself up to variance or even free hitting a game week 2, which I've seen James from Planet FPL is interested in, and I'm not going to lie, I have had a look at it, and I could end up doing it. That might be the way that I navigate the very early weeks. I do think that a lot of that kind of question is a very hard thing to insure against, if that makes sense, at the start of the season, because we simply don't know. Like, we're simply giving our best guess for what could happen over the first 4 weeks. and 4 to 6 weeks. So 6 weeks being my outer limit. And I think that having run it all the way through on the proviso that I like bench boost 1, or I feel like I'm kind of convinced to do get bench boost 1. I'm reasonably convinced that this team would stand past muster for the first 4 weeks, allowing for someone like Bruno to go off, and I'd still kind of have enough quality throughout the team to make it work. Hence the sustainable part of the sustainable bench boost, as it were, because I've got lots of flexibility in how that works. If we're saying that the 5.0 midfielder, Wan-Bissaka, and then the goalkeeper are the 3 which are pretty much always on the bench because West Ham's fixture on after game 1 isn't that great. Other than that, I've got a core of very good, strong players who have got a good expected minutes, who have fixtures that rotate well with each other. So, Porro game week 2, he misses out. Off the bench comes Strand Larson. And then game week, I think the week you mentioned with Neco Williams, for example, he goes on the bench, obviously, and then I play 3-4-3, and I'm fine that week. I mean, I would have to play Wood, but by then we're in game week 4, so maybe I would make a transfer by then, because the hope would be that I'd have 3 free transfers, or maybe 2 if I'd done the free hit and 2. So I know we don't really like to say, oh yeah, no, I'll just take a few hits and manage it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that at the start of the season, we simply don't know. We kind of lose that appreciation for the manic nature of what FPL can be like. When we get that first week of information, all hell breaks loose. You'll see players starting to rise and fall dramatically in price. Oh, and Dye hasn't scored versus Leeds. Well, he's trash. I don't know. Adingra has gone off into all the brace against West Ham. Well, we need to buy him immediately. And all that sort of stuff starts to really impact you. And at this point, I think it's just a case of being being a bit stoic about it almost, Sam. I know that's a really woolly answer, but that's kind of the best thing I can do. And I think that's kind of what I say every year, that it's hard to cover it, especially this year. I think it's difficult to cover all the price points in some ways. Because if we could cover all the price points like we could a couple of years ago, then there's much less variety in the game.
Yeah. And I think you've hit the nail on the end with that end point, that it is almost impossible. In fact, it is actually impossible to cover all of the different price points this season, which is a good thing. The ones that I'm unable to cover with my structure, Haaland, obviously, Isak, just about, but with 1.5 million, I can get Watkins up to Isak if I desperately need to, I suppose. And then the other one is that 8 to 9 million midfielder. Less worried about Saka, if I'm honest, because I can't escape the feeling that I think Gyökeres will end up being the one on penalties and a better pick. But if worse comes to worse, then Palmer, Saka are basically one and the same in terms of price. For me, my biggest concern is the 8 to 9 million midfielder. Everything else, I can get to any defender in the game with one move if I needed to. Outside of 5.5 keepers, there's pretty much not a player I can't get to. So Bruno's the one that everywhere I'm looking, I'm like, okay, he at 9 million, he represents better value than that price, because he's probably on penalties, because he gets 90 minutes, because he's got good data and better players playing in front of him as well. And now the DEFCON comes into it as well too. So I'm just, I can see him either sneaking into my draft, or there being a structure where I maybe start with Wirtz instead of that Semenyo spot, downgrade somewhere, and just make it easier for myself for crisis planning. So
I agree with you.
I don't disagree with your stoicism at all. I think it's a sensible way to play it. And after 2 or 3 weeks, we might have 2 or 3 transfers to make those more drastic changes. But one thing that I want to avoid this season is needing to ever use those 2 or 3 transfers in one go. I'd like to be able to stack them as quickly as possible. I'd like to plan for the worst, so that anything unexpected that does happen, because there will be loads of unexpected stuff that happens, I can resolve it in 2 moves maximum. And Haaland, I think, is probably the only one I couldn't do that with, because I think the likelihood of Salah not being a good option is very, very low, and he's the only player I could sacrifice to get across to Haaland in 2 moves. So that's my own almost self-criticism of my draft as well.
It's mine too.
That midfielder 3, that number 3 midfielder, Semenyo, whether it's Eze, whether it's Rodgers, I'm more in love with the 8.5 to 9 million midfielder than I am with the 7.5 to 7. I really like Eze, but there's that question mark over Arsenal at the moment. We won't know that come game week 1. So, yeah, I just wonder if I can see a universe by game week 3 when Bruno has Burnley. I'm just like, oh, get me over to him immediately. Because actually looking at a lot of the review stuff and the algorithms, and like obviously we shouldn't look too closely, but he is coming out very close to the top, if not the top, for expected points that week. So he's a standout captain in 2 of the first 7. So that's not bad for someone at 9 million. So I just wonder if there's an argument to just make sure if it's not Bruno, just the price point is covered and like you can get to him easily if in case, break glass in case of emergency kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of points there. So the first one on Haaland, I think that if he does start the season gangbusters and he does kind of do what he did at the start of last year, there's obviously the way you can go when at the time people were kind of deriding people who didn't go there. You can try to hold out against that, but if it does get to the point where you're like, oh god, my season's over, it hasn't begun, I don't think that is the case, because obviously there are those people who were ranked and ridiculously low and then kind of found themselves in the top 100k by the end of the year. But I think that possibly becomes like the one time that you might consider wildcarding to get a certain player, which is obviously like that is literally like break glass, break another bit of glass, and break the third bit of glass, and press the "Are you sure?" button, and then put in your password to ensure that that's the right thing to do.
Fingerprint, I scan everything. Yeah,
and I think that if you covered 99 out of 100 angles, which I think that we both kind of have tried to in our thinking to some extent, although there are some differences in how we've approached that problem, then I think that that's probably just about okay. You can be comfortably uncomfortable with that one, if that makes sense. On the Bruno question, the only thing that I kind of have in place for that is is basically one of those horrible double moves like you mentioned. So say at that point I just think, okay, I really need to get to Bruno. I do have a way to get there, assuming he hasn't risen by 0.5, which is to take Wood down to a POS striker at 4.5 and then do and die to Bruno. That gives 9.5. That was kind of the route that I was thinking. And I think obviously it's always good to do that in one move, but if you can get there in 2, assuming you're going to roll between 2 and 3 or have a transfer roll, at the worst case scenario is -4. We do ideally want to be stacking transfers, but considering I'm starting with bench boost 1 and I'm fairly convinced by that, I think I'm going to have to maybe take that sort of thing as it comes a little bit. So I really have looked at when I bench boost otherwise, and it just doesn't suit me in the way I play, given the changeable results, Sam. I'm not sure that this is the right thing to be saying, but I've looked kind of quite far in the future, and the part of my brain kicks in that says we just don't know whether this is the right thing. And
it's very cloudy.
You could be fine to just do what you said, and if you've got 5 free transfers, spend 3 of them. Okay, my bench looks all right, but at this point, we've got I guess you have this team, assuming all goes well, at the lowest possible price for the value that I am not basing on evidence which is current. I'm basing on a cold case of evidence from the past, but I think that there's value in the team that I've got effectively. To do that bench boost. So but you're completely right that it's I think the key weakness really is the midfield jump and those players that are in the middle, which can be very harmful. Like, who say that Marmoush, for example, who's been pretty much universally overlooked, doesn't kind of start the season on fire, and then hey, you know what, how are we getting there? Who knows? Phil Foden even. I just wanted to just say, I meant to say this a little while ago, I couldn't work out whether I was surprised or not that after kind of I did a lot of kind of individual kind of thinking and all this sort and kind of research. Am I surprised that you've also ended up really liking Strand Larsen or not? I don't know. I don't know whether I am or not. Just because with him, he's probably the one that maybe people will be like, oh, that's a really weird one for 2 people to have in common. I don't know what it's like online. I'm not going to lie. I haven't looked too hard. But with him, as you said, first fixture bad. The following fixtures are okay. And if you want to stave off wildcarding, I haven't got a fixed time that I'm going to wildcard. I think this team's sustainable enough. And as you said, decent underlying numbers for the price. So around the same as Welbeck for non-pen XG per 90, similar XG per 90 for the likes of Bowens, Semenyo, JP, Joao Pedro, that is Wood, Rogers, should have penalties, as you said. And just the idea is a talisman now.
Yeah.
I mean, Cunha's gone, so the hopium is that the other Wolves signings like
Arias or
Mr. Arias, and Menezzi and co step up to fill no Cunha void. But no, Wolves did well without Cunha last year when he was off due to Glasses Gate and things like that.
exactly.
And, for him being like the talisman, the main source of FPL points in that team versus a Welbeck, who I do really like. Don't get me wrong, I really do like Welbeck. But they've got better attack, but the points are more spread, right? I actually quite like Jorginho at 6.0, by the way. I couldn't quite get there. If I got 0.5, and I'd probably upgrade Wilson to him. But yeah, I just really like Strand Larsen. I think at the price 6.5, I think that's kind of 0.5 below. There's no Joao Pedro this year at 5.5, is there? But I do really like that. Maybe we're putting too much stock in a terrible team, but I quite like the talisman in a terrible team. Those things are never bad things. You think about how Jared Bowen's done over the last few years, for example.
Oh yeah, exactly. I think at 6.5, it's just great value. Like you rarely get a pick that cheap that has a very likely chance of penalties, very likely chance to be the talisman for the team, and solid minutes as well. So I think he got 14 goals last season, which again, for a first season in the Premier League, very, very healthy numbers in a side where he wasn't necessarily the out and out talisman or on penalties. So yeah, I think again, for the price, like I'm not saying he's a game-breaking player or anything like that. Like it's not like you must own Strand Larsen. I just think it's very reasonable value for the price, and I'm more confident that his upside potential is higher than that of Danny Welbeck, who is also a good value pick at 6.5, but he's older. He's only ever scored 10 goals in the league in his best season, and his injury record's patchy as well. So I think Strand Larsen just brings that little bit more of reassurance that he could be a good pick for longer. And because I'm looking at wildcarding much later on potentially, I think I don't expect Wolves to be a top half team or anything like that, but I don't expect them to be so awful that they're not able to get Strand Larsen another 14, 15 goals this season.
Yeah, I agree. Because if you think about last year and how they were doing absolutely abysmally, weren't they? Until they had their fixtures turned on a dime, and suddenly they had a really good run of fixtures. And what's the one thing that we've both mentioned? That actually after game week 1, their fixtures are all pretty good. Really, the first 10 game weeks taken, all 3 newly promoted clubs, and a few kind of okay games. And a player like that, I think Newcastle away in 4, maybe, and Spurs away in 6. But other than that, they're all teams that, based on what we know now, don't fill me with too much dread. So I think that's all right. On the other hand, paired with that, that's why I've got Chris Wood in, Sam, because even though there's lots of buts, I know that Mark Sullivan's was a little bit sort of like saying it's probably we're going to win 1-0. That's kind of what they're doing last year. And there's 2 ways of looking at the Wood thing, as we mentioned as well on the framing part of the Psych Pod, which is just like you could read his data in 2 ways. And the key one, really, without playing a psychological trick on you, is saying that he massively overperformed last year. That's not sustainable. Versus he's got a lot of experience and is using that experience to finish basically from being in the 6-yard box and knowing and has loads of guile about his movement. He's probably okay to start the season and play the first sort of 6 game weeks maybe on paper, and then just kind of see where it goes from there, because those fixtures taking Burnley and Sunderland, which is Southampton but Sunderland, between 5 and 6, right? So and then the Arsenal game in 4 is whatever, but he's the sort of player who always seems to score against us for some reason. So I don't hate it as a 7.5, and I think that my question to you is if he is in your thoughts if Solanke is injured, because that's kind of the question really around Solanke for me. I like Solanke a lot. X minutes are great, and I think that, as I said, and I'll say this next week, my bold claim for the season is that Solanke ends up being top scoring forward. It's just because I've got those fears about the injury that he's got, Super Cup and then Burnley, with Richarlison waiting in the wings potentially. I just don't know whether he'll start the season. And he's immediately going to be benched in the game week 2 potentially, although City for Spurs are a good fixture, oddly, and City for Thomas Frank are a good fixture as well. So I wouldn't actually be that worried if Solanke did start the season. But if it turns out that Solanke is a bit of a risk for game week 1, is Wood your kind of number 1 fullback, or do you have another option in mind?
Yeah, I think he is probably my number 1 fullback, to be honest. I also really like Evan Nilsson, but if I've got Semenyo in my midfield anyway, then I don't really want to double up on the Bournemouth attack. I'm not that confident in them. So, I think Wood probably would be my second option at 7.5 right now. I don't love João Pedro. I don't love Mateta enough right now, I don't think. So I think Chris Wood, although long term, I'm a little less confident because Forest have got Europe to contend with as well, and which is a new thing for Chris Wood and for Forest. Whereas with Spurs, okay, yes, same problem. They've got Champions League to deal with, but Solanke, I think, is a better player than Chris Wood. Fundamentally, I think Spurs are a better, or at least have the potential upside of a better side than Forest this season, although that might be a little bit unrealistic considering their league positions last year. So feel free to shout it and disagree with me. That's fine. But I can see Spurs moving in an upwards trajectory this season under Thomas Frank. We know what he's able to get out of his centre forwards, and Solanke, I think if he's fit, would be my preferred option. But if there's any doubt whatsoever, then Chris Wood is absolutely fine.
Fair. A couple of others then. For me personally, I'm a bit unsure about, and it's kind of a symptom of kind of what I've chosen to do here, but I'm a little bit unsure about the Wilson pick at 5.5. Full disclosure, that was Marlon up until about an hour and a half before the pod started, and I saw that Guesson is being signed for them. I was pretty high on Marlon, but I think that kind of I think it's the same for Wilson as well. There's going to be kind of opposition for his position, but I think Marlon will start the season. But I think that I kind of worry that a new player coming in might change that. It could well still be Marlon, but I think Wilson last year did have a really decent, in the time that he was on the pitch, did have a decent sort of points per start or points per 90 on the set pieces. Like, we're all looking for that magic bean, aren't we, Sam? After Mahrez at 5.5 all those years ago, was it Bailey? Was it Bob? No. So hopefully third time lucky. I don't know, and there's lots of different ways to read the Fulham situation. Like, I was speaking to a friend of the pod, James, about this, and no activity for Fulham, I think, can go two ways. One is that it's a positive settled team, and Wilson's been doing fairly well in pre-season, or B, they're all stale and a bit angry at each other. Wilson's not an essential part of this team in many ways, actually. Because I've got the four big defenders at the back, that kind of helps compensate and gives me sustainability, that word again, over having to play him every week, honestly. But I'm not too sure about that as kind of the biggest sort of about the team I've got here. I'm not actually as bothered about having a 5.0, be it Baleba, who should start, let's be fair, or a Xhaka, if I do go that way, at Sunderland, who clearly didn't know he was signing for, got to say, judging by his interview. Yeah, that's my kind of big sort of but about my team, I think. I mean, what do you think of that? And then following on, what's yours at the moment, do you reckon?
Yeah, so I think with the 5.5s, we've been given a unique opportunity this season to remove the doubt. And that's the way I'm playing it. So I like Wilson potentially. I liked Marlon potentially. Adingra potentially. And we've had this every single season since all of us started playing FPL, where there's a handful of cheap options that we're all selecting between. One of them ends up being great, like really standout good value. One of the talking points of the season that we all remember, like we all remember Palmer, we all remember Rodgers. Like every season there's one that just blows up out of nowhere, and a handful of people called it correctly. This season, though, I don't think you need to take that risk, not to begin with anyway, because what we've been gifted is a selection of 5.5 and even in certain cases 5 million midfielders that you don't have that risk attached to the minutes, the attacking upside, whether or not they're in a good team, whether or not the potential is there. All of those things can be removed now and replaced with the drip feed not guarantee, but like more assured and consistent rate of DEFCON points. So Anderson is one example. There are others, like a Caicedo, for instance, who will get good minutes. We know that. So box ticked. Anderson is on some set pieces, so box ticked, in a decent enough side, box ticked, and will drip feed DEFCON points, because although they're not, it's never guaranteed, but we know through several seasons of data that those kind of players do reproduce those points on a consistent basis, and not even in fixtures that are necessarily the best on paper. So we don't need to own him for a run of amazing fixtures. We can own him whenever. And I think until the moment the guarantee of a 5.5 does come out the woodwork and we're like, yeah, that is the pick. That's the one. The Rodgers emerges, the Palmer emerges, whatever. It could be Harry Wilson. Absolutely not ruling that out. But until we know which one that is, I'm very happy to take the 4 to 7, 8 point ceiling for Anderson, but 4 point floor every single week on my bench. And then if he ever comes off it, then great. And over the season, if I have to hold on to him for longer, he'll drip feed me consistent enough points to get him to about 140, 150. And we can say that with a much higher level of confidence. Obviously, no guarantees, but a higher level of confidence than with a very wide range of 5.5s or 5 million midfielders, which maybe one or two of them will end up being as good as we think they will be. And by the time I'm confident on which one that will be, I'll make the move. But for now, I'm happy enough just going with the incredibly boring, low upside, but yeah, it will get me decent points week on week. And if I ever need to play him, I can. So yeah, I think that's where I'm just really trying to play cautiously at the beginning of the season. I don't want to end up in a situation like I did at the start of last season where I need to make 3 or 4 moves because my X minutes are just not strong enough after a couple of game weeks. And that's, as you can see from this draft, that's what I'm trying to minimize here. So maybe there is space for a risk or two, or an X minutes risk, but I think with Anderson, it just removes the necessity to take that risk to begin with for me. So that would be my angle on the 5.5s. I'm not ruling out Wilson. He could be amazing, genuinely. And when he's on the pitch, last season he was very, very impressive. He's a great talent. What is my main issue with my side? I think my main but is I wish I could have a 5.5 defender alongside Van Dijk. It would be great to have Munoz in there or any other 5.5. I think Munoz is a standout good pick, but I just haven't been able to squeeze him in. And then it's that third midfielder spot, which I would like it to be Eze at least, and get that 0.5 out of Strand Larsen or somewhere else to upgrade to Eze. But ideally, I'd want it to be Wirtz or Bruno. And yeah, maybe just a little bit more excitement there as well. And I think that the players in that price point really excite me. And I'm just a little bit annoyed that in my current draft, I haven't got that covered, and I don't have a really easy route to get there other than maybe downgrading Watkins and upgrading Semenyo, which I could do before game week 1. I could just switch those price points around, to be fair.
Yeah. I think that's a possibility for me, definitely. That kind of gets rid of the take Watkins out, put in something like a Semenyo. I don't think I'd get all the way up to a Wirtz and be able to keep it balanced, but do something like that. Yeah. And then take it that way. I hear you on the Anderson thing. The only thing is that I feel like that's 0.5 too much for bench security. That's my only sort of but about your but I suppose. And that's the only sort of thing that gets in my mind about that. The projected points probably there's about 20-30 points between Anderson and Abelaba, for example, if you added in all kind of their DEFCON from last year, because Anderson was pretty mad on it, wasn't he? Overall, I think we kind of calculated about 14 per start. I'm sure that kind of was replicated elsewhere. So it is worth the 0.5. It's just, will I see those points, or will I feel bad about those points being at my bench? And yes, okay, on your point as well, if you kind of are at a position where you've got to basically zero a point in your team to buy in a Bruno, then okay, if I've got to pay Anderson for a few weeks, then so be it. I'm happy to do that. It's just a tiny bit too expensive for me. And maybe it comes back to me making the decision to bench boost that the 5.5 needs to play a little bit more, but also that feeds into my decision making around having a Porro here. So if Porro went down to a De Cooper or something like that, then I've got $1 million to make Wilson into a 6.5, who like a Rice or something like that, or even a Rodri, I don't know, or a Kudus, to make that all kind of work. So yeah, sounds like there's still quite a few things up in the air. I just feel like I always want to be mostly there, Sam, and the players that I guess to finish with who feel like they are kind of vaguely locked in my squad now. I think as Virgil, almost definitely. Neco, I think probably similar level of certainty to Virgil. Palmer and Salah goes without saying, and then probably Watkins, Wood, and Strand Larson as the front three. Like I really like them, and the rest of them, if they do kind of move around, I feel like I've kind of honed in on like a particular kind of section of players, and particular A versus B, so they can Porro down to a 4.5, extra million to turn Wilson to Rice or Rodri or some other 6.5, or maybe into Tielemans at 6.0, and kind of have the extra 5 to piss around with elsewhere. All these little things I could possibly do. So there's going to be a little bit of rearrangement of the deck chairs on Titanic, but I think ultimately I'm in a position where I feel like I have thought about it. I've definitely kind of I wouldn't be in a position where I'd be like, oh my god, I missed an avenue here. I'm sure lots of people may watch this and think, oh god, he's missed so much. There's so many things that I quite like about this, but that's the point. Like, there's I quite like where I've kind of ended up, and I'm confident that I haven't missed too many avenues. It's just about the identities of those final few players. But if Game Week 1 starts tomorrow, Sam, I think I'd be happy, which is probably a good place to be. I think with just over a week to go by the time of publication.
Yeah, agreed. And look, I think at this point it is more important to have a structure in place that you're happy with. So it sounds like you're very happy with Bench Boost 1. It sounds like a lot of the price points are in place, and there might be one or two like edits to that, but largely it sounds like you're confident on the way you're structuring the 11 and the 15. And I would say I'm getting there as well in terms of the price point structure. So I'll probably go with the 2 premium mids, or like one premium light in Palmer. No Haaland obviously sorts out the structure a little bit. I would like one more expensive forward. Whether that's Watkins or Gyökeres, I think it's likely to be Watkins, but obviously he's been subject to some transfer speculation, so I wouldn't want to guarantee that and lock that in just yet. I want that middle price point covered at the minimum, a Semenyo at 7 million, but up to an 8.5 or 9 in Wirtz or Fernandes. I think it's important to have one 6.5 in the midfield as well. It could be an NDI, it could be a Kudus. I actually really like Rodri as well, but I'm not yet confident enough on starting with him given his injury. Rice could be a good pick too. And then I'm pretty set on Anderson as well. I'm pretty confident on that one, and I completely take on board your point about not leaving too much money on the bench. But because I'm not bench boosting in one, and because 2 of my spots on the bench are already 4 millions, I can spend an extra $1 million on one of those bench spots as a rotatable 8th attacker, and it just gives me that security and almost transfer insurance for any sort of like 1 week issue that I might need to deal with that otherwise I'd need to make a move for. So it's a bit of a transfer saver and a floor raiser. And hey, I can start him in some weeks. I'm probably, if I have Semenyo, I will start him ahead of Semenyo in game week 1. So he is startable. Yeah, that Solanke versus Wood, other 7.5 second striker, is up in the air. Strand Larson, I'm confident in as my 6.5, unless Thiago or Füllkrug become the guy, and then I'm happy enough to maybe downgrade that to use that money elsewhere. But if I go with a 6.5 striker, happy with him. Most of my defense I'm pretty set on. Van Dijk, Williams, Dev. I think that they're very likely to be in my game week 1 draft, as is Sanchez. Dubravka, if he gets his move, yes, as well. And then it's those two 4.5s. I'm just trying to work out different combinations that rotate well and also help me out in game week 4 or 5 whenever Nottingham Forest have that Arsenal game as well. So yeah, but things will change for sure. I wouldn't be confident saying that I'll go into game week 1 with this exact side, but a bit like you, I think the price points are pretty settled at the moment. I don't think too many bits of money are going to move across positions too much at this point. Some identities of players might shift a little. And hey, transfers can happen in the next week. So not going to rule myself out of anything. But yeah, I'm happy with where we're at the moment. I'm fairly confident on, well, not bench boosting in game week 1 as it stands, which seems a bit scary considering that's quite a popular strategy. But I like the idea of doing it in game week 2 or leaving it to random week either side of the wild card. I think that's being largely overlooked, and I quite like that angle as well. Which, and again, look, if a bench boost goes wrong, I'm maybe 10 points down. It's really not season defining. So I'm just not going to worry about it that much. I think that's my strategy for this year on bench boost. I'm just not going to worry about it as much as I think some people are. And if that's game week 2, great. If it's later on, absolutely fine.
Yeah, I feel you. There's a tiny bit of more work to do, but I feel like we're basically there. And to be honest, I don't know whether to what extent. Okay, with a player like Marlon and a player coming in, that's a bit more of a worry because at 5.5, that's just a bit annoying. But if a big ticket player does come in now at this proximity to the start of the season, I maybe, especially if I wouldn't be worried about it dislodging like a bigger pick in the team.
Yeah.
If a Watkins did leave, then that would probably change things. But that kind of does fit into the fairly big sort of story that I may have to do some exposition on come when we publish this one. But yeah, cool. Right. Well, next week, I guess on Tuesday, we'll come back to this. Probably not talk about everything in the same amount of depth and detail. I'm sure we'll have a few other things to talk about. We've mentioned ceiling and floor a couple of times, and I think that Sam with the Anderson point, I let that go a little bit because I feel like we need to keep some powder dry for next week rather than repeat this pod again. But I think that's a really interesting discussion point for next week. But yeah, I'm very happy with that, I think. And yeah, very interesting to kind of see where we are and what our thoughts are going into the final week of preseason.
Absolutely. And this was really good fun, like completely off script. Neither of us knew what we were going to be saying. So, yeah, really enjoyed those chats and hopefully more of them to come this season as well. So let us know whether or not you enjoyed this format in tandem with our normal running order over the preseason. And obviously, if you did, we'll look at maybe doing some more stuff like this in the future, maybe in wildcard weeks, free hit weeks, that kind of stuff might be quite interesting. But in the meantime, hopefully you did enjoy today's show. Hopefully your planning is going well. We have been Who Got the Assist. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us on Blue Sky at Who Got the Assist, all written out in one word, or FPL Pricey, on X at WGTA_FPL or FPL Pricey, and on YouTube it's WGTA_FPL, and I'm on here as FPL Pricey as well. And thank you as well to everyone who subscribed to me since last week's pod. I've just gone past 4,000, which was my preseason goal. So thank you all so much for doing that.
Well done, mate.
If you are one of those, thank you, Tom. I really appreciate it. And this show has also been a massive help, and I've really enjoyed doing both. So yeah, thank you very much. If you did enjoy the pod, please do one or all of the following, including following us on those social channels, giving the pod a 5-star rating on Spotify, iTunes, wherever. And of course, leaving a like and hitting subscribe on YouTube. That's very, very helpful. All of those things really do help us out. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks very much indeed. Hope you enjoyed having the extra pod this week. Do go and listen to the other pod with Ross. I know it's not everyone's bag, but we really enjoyed doing it, and it is seriously, genuinely, really insightful, as you'd expect from having Ross on. Hope to do a fair bit this week. We're back next Tuesday for the final pod of preseason. I think Sam, you're doing a live stream as well on the Thursday night, aren't you? Before Festival?
Yeah. I'm not going to compete with the deadline streamers because they'll just swamp me out. So what I'm I'm going to do this season, as many weeks as possible, do a live stream the night before a deadline. So usually it'll be like a Friday night with a beer or two, and we'll play some games, we'll talk through drafts, and we'll talk through transfer options, that kind of thing, have a bit of fun. And then obviously next Thursday, the day before the game week 1 locks in, I'll introduce that live stream to everyone, and hopefully we can chill out, have a bit of fun, and without the pressure of having to lock in our teams towards the end of a stream and worrying about early team news and all of that stuff, so we can have a bit more fun.
Awesome. We'll join Sam for that next week on FPL Price. Remind you of that as well. Otherwise, we will see you next Tuesday.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Prescription products require completion of an online medication consultation with an independent healthcare provider through the LifeMD platform and are only available if prescribed. Subscription required. Individual results may vary. Additional restrictions apply at lifemd.com. Read all warnings before using GLP-1s. Side effects may include a risk of thyroid C-cell tumors. Do not use GLP-1s if you or your family have a history of thyroid cancer.
Confused on where to start with weight loss medication? See the lowest prices available with or without insurance for Wegovy, Zepbound, and more at trylifemd.com. 95% of LifeMD patients said starting their weight loss journey was simple. Listen to Tara's story after losing 42 pounds.
You just take your shot. It doesn't feel like you're on a diet. What I wasn't expecting it to do was to shut off the food noise. I've gone from 237 to 195. This was life-altering, and if I can do it, I feel like anybody can do it.
Get your free insurance benefits check in minutes right now at trylifemd.com. Nearly 96% of patients said they would recommend the LifeMD program to anyone who wants to lose weight. Get started right now at trylifemd.com. That's TRYLIFEMD.com.
With Robinhood, not only can you trade individual stocks and ETFs, you can also seamlessly buy and sell crypto at low costs. Trade all in one place. Get started now on Robinhood. Trading crypto involves significant risk. Crypto trading is offered through an account with Robinhood Crypto LLC. Robinhood Crypto is licensed to engage in virtual currency business activity by the New York State Department of Financial Services. Crypto held through Robinhood Crypto is not FDIC insured or SIPC protected. Investing involves risk, including loss of principal. Securities trading is offered through an account with Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, a registered broker-dealer.